Africanism, peace and Pan-Africanism. Peace and Pan-Africanism, peace and Pan-Africanism. Peace and Pan-Africanism, peace and Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism by any means necessary. This is King Kong Consciousness, Intercontinental 𝚂𝚂𝚁𝙸𝙱𝙴, the notorious RBG, the Prince of Pan-Africanism, Dr. Umar 𝚂𝚂𝚁𝙸𝙺𝙴. I'm in Detroit, Michigan. I am in Detroit, Michigan. I am in Detroit, Michigan, and I am here to pay honor to one of our greatest inventors, one of our greatest ancestors. I'm here to pay honor to one of our greatest inventions, one of our greatest ancestors. I'm here to pay honor to one of our greatest inventors, one of our greatest ancestors. Here lies an ancestor by the name of Elijah McCoy. Here lies an ancestor by the name of Elijah McCoy. Here lies an ancestor by the name of Elijah McCoy. If you have ever heard the phrase, the real McCoy, the real McCoy was coined after this brother whose inventions were so powerful and whose inventions were so reliable that people often stole and copied and counterfeited and bootlegged his inventions. So because his self-lubricating cup that he made, he invented a method to automatically lubricate the engine parts of trains and ships, which was later extended to cars and planes and other types of moving automobiles and mechanics, that it was so popular that everybody needed to get their hands on it, so they started stealing it and replicating it. But people wanted the real thing. They wanted the self-lubricating engine cup that Elijah McCoy had invented himself. And that's where the phrase, the real McCoy, comes from. That's where the phrase, the real McCoy, comes from. Now, Elijah McCoy's parents ran away from slavery on the Underground Railroad. Elijah McCoy's parents ran away from slavery on the Underground Railroad. Elijah McCoy's parents ran away from slavery on the Underground Railroad, 𝚂𝚂𝚁𝙸𝙺𝙴 3 times. And they ran away from slavery in Kentucky. They ran away from slavery in Kentucky. They ran away from slavery in Kentucky. Shout out to my Kentucky Africans. Shout out to all my Kentucky Africans. Shout out to all my Kentucky Africans. And so Elijah McCoy's parents ran away from slavery in Kentucky, and they ended up in Canada. They ended up in Canada, brothers and sisters. Elijah McCoy was born in Canada. He was one of 10 or 11 children. He was one or 10 of 11 children. His parents returned to the United States. They returned to the United States, and Elijah McCoy was naturalized, and he became a U.S. citizen at the age of 15. Now check this out. At the age of 15, Elijah McCoy's parents sends him to Scotland, the country Scotland in Europe, and he enrolls in the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He enrolled in the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He enrolled at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and I believe he was only about 15 years old in college. 15 years old in college. Okay, I believe he was only 15. He was 15 when he got to Scotland. It's possible he could have been a little bit older when he enrolled at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He became a certified mechanical engineer. He became a certified mechanical engineer. He became a certified mechanical engineer at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He then returned back to America. Okay, he ultimately moved to Michigan. All right, he moved to Michigan, and he couldn't get a job as a certified mechanical engineer. He couldn't get a job as a certified mechanical engineer. He couldn't get a job as a certified mechanical engineer. So he became a fireman, and he became an oil man. They would pay you to go into the engine and oil the parts of the engine. So while working as an oil man on the engines of the Michigan Railroad Company, he invented this idea. He came up with an idea of a self-lubricating oil cup that would be inside the engine. He came up with this idea of a self-lubricating oil cup that would be inside the engine and would automatically oil the parts of the engine that needed the oil. This was Elijah McCoy's greatest invention. He invented more than 57 things in his life. Booker T. Washington credited him in his Story of the Negro in 1909. Pan-Africanist educator Booker T. Washington credited him in his Story of the Negro in 1909 as having made more inventions than any other African in America up until that time. He is credited as having invented more things than any other African in America up until that time. but he couldn't get a real job. So he ended up inventing the self-lubricating engine. So whenever you drive a car, whenever you're on a train, whenever you're on a bus, whenever you're on a plane, I don't care if you got a Honda, I don't care if you got a Chevy, I don't care if you got a Benz, I don't care if you got a Beamer, I don't care what bus you're driving on. The only reason why that car, that bus, that plane, that train doesn't have to stop and re-oil every hour or every 15 minutes is because of this black man. He transformed transportation. I said Elijah McCoy transformed transportation. I said Elijah McCoy transformed transportation, brothers and sisters. And when he became old, when he became an elder, he opened up the McCoy Manufacturing Center to produce many of the things that he invented. But he really didn't have enough money to really get his manufacturing company off the ground the way that he wanted to. So what a lot of black inventors did back then is they sold their inventions to wealthy white men. They sold their inventions to wealthy white men. And what happened by black inventors selling their inventions to wealthy white men, they never really got the credit. The white man who bought the invention claimed the invention. The white men who bought the inventions from the black inventors claimed the inventions. The white men who bought the inventions from the black inventors claimed the inventions. And what the white power structure did is they kept black inventors poor. They kept black inventors from being able to access capital because they never wanted the black inventors to become millionaires and billionaires. They never wanted the black inventors to become millionaires and billionaires, so they deliberately denied them loans and they deliberately kept them poor so they would have to sell their patents or sell their inventions to the rich white man. Now, unfortunately, Elijah McCoy's wife, Mama McCoy, may she rest in paradise. Elijah McCoy's wife died in a car accident in 1923. His wife died in a car accident in 1923, but not before she opened up the Phyllis Wheatley Home for Aged Black Men. That's right, Elijah McCoy's wife opened up a home for elderly black men. I believe it was 1898. She opened up the home for elderly black men because, you know, there was no old folks home for black people back then. There were no elderly homes for black people back then. So when we got old and we could no longer work and we couldn't afford to take care of ourselves, they would just put us out on the street. See, the original homeless person of America was the black man and woman. I said the original homeless population of America was the black man and woman, because in slavery, when you could no longer work for the slave master, they turned you out on the streets to die. And after slavery, when you could no longer work for yourself to pay your bills and keep a roof over your head, they would turn us out to the streets and die. And Elijah McCoy died on the anniversary of Gabriel Prosser's slave rebellion, on the anniversary of the execution of Gabriel Prosser, who organized the Great Slave Rebellion of Richmond, Virginia. Gabriel Prosser was executed October the 10th. Elijah McCoy died October the 10th. Gabriel Prosser was executed October the 10th. Elijah McCoy died October the 10th of 1929, a few months after the Most Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey held his great convention in Jamaica after being deported from America. Garvey's convention was in August of 29, and Elijah McCoy passed away in October of 29. Brothers and sisters, let us remember the ancestors. This is why we need the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. This is why we need the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. This is why we need the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. Remember the ancestors. I want to give a shout out to the parents of our brother 𝚂𝚄𝙱𝚂𝚗. I spoke at his memorial celebration for the community yesterday. Our brother accidentally overdosed on opioids. We got to protect our youth. We got to organize our youth. We got to save our youth. We don't want no young people taking opioids. We don't want no young people taking opioids. We don't want no young people taking opioids. We don't want no young people smoking synthetic marijuana. We don't want no young people smoking synthetic marijuana. We don't want no young people smoking synthetic marijuana. Brothers and sisters, we got to organize. Brothers and sisters, we got to unite. Brothers and sisters, we got to fight, and we got to come together for the liberation of African people. I said we got to come together for the liberation of African people. I said we got to come together for the liberation of African people. I had to come pay respects to the great ancestor before I go to the airport. I had to come pay respects to the great ancestor before I go to the airport. I had to come pay respects to the great ancestor before I go to the airport, brothers and sisters. What's going on here? I had to come pay respects to the great ancestor before I go to the airport. King Kong Consciousness, Detroit, Michigan.